Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out. We will get to a formal introduction, but first we are going to start with our national anthem. So if you could please rise, and then there will be a flag popping up. There it is on the screen. And I believe Rick is queuing the music up, so we will start that up right now.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nicole McLaughlin, and on behalf of the Northern Indiana Community Coalition on Healthcare and Community Wellness Partners, the co-sponsors of this event, I'd like to welcome you to this moderated town hall meeting on healthcare. I want to start by acknowledging the members of our healthcare coalition who volunteered their time to organize this event, and our families who've sacrificed our living rooms and time with us to allow us to do this work. So if you're a coalition member or a family member, please stand up right now and let's acknowledge the work that they've put in. They've worked really hard. Thank you. I also want to thank and acknowledge Carl Nichols, the Executive Director of Community Wellness Partners. Carl, if you would please stand. Carl provided resources, space, and expertise in helping this event take shape as well. And finally, I want to thank our two moderators for today, ABC 57's Taylor Popolars and Torian Small, who volunteered to help today's event to run efficiently and make sure that people's questions are heard. We at NCHIC, as we like to call it, care a lot about the facts. So indulge me for a minute as I tell you how this event came to be from my vantage point. In 2012, at 42 years of age, I was diagnosed with an aggressive type of cancer with a high rate of recurrence. I learned a lot about our healthcare system during this time. I saw how insurance company profits and the bottom line shaped my access to tests and care on a daily basis. I met uninsured cancer patients who had much more stress and uncertainty added to the terror that I felt. And I learned a lot about the checks and balances on insurers that were provided through the Affordable Care Act, which had recently been passed after years of work. When in January of this year, our Congresswoman, Jackie Walorski, along with the Congressional majority and President Trump, began taking quick action to repeal the ACA, I was not surprised that she did not agree with my position on healthcare. But I was shocked that when she spoke against the ACA, she never acknowledged the people it had helped or made clear what would happen to the 60,000 people in her own district who had gained health coverage through the act. Even when myself and others raised these issues in phone calls and Facebook posts and visits to her office, I decided to see if other people felt the way I did Literally in my family room, I started a petition as an individual to ask Walorski to hold a town hall meeting, to organize a town hall meeting herself on the Affordable Care Act. In a few weeks, the petition had 1,200 signatures, and I began to meet people face to face who suggested that we get together and move ahead with scheduling a town hall meeting during the congressional recess happening now. We formed this group, the Northern Indiana Community Coalition on Healthcare, and began having meetings. Thank you. And began having meetings at the public library. Few of us knew each other before we started, and there were virtually no seasoned activists among us. Many of us were brand new to taking action in the public sphere. We differ in our backgrounds, and we actually differ on our positions on healthcare and on other issues. But what we agreed on was that pushing for repeal of the ACA without giving a clear outlook on what that would mean for us here in the 2nd District was not responsive or responsible government. So here we are today. Although our Congresswoman never stopped pushing for repeal, other members of Congress in other parts of the country did listen to their constituents and backed off on the first effort to repeal. We're going to hear more about the future as we go on, but we feel like we were part of a larger national movement to slow down the process and to allow for the kind of deliberation we're going to do here today. Despite many invitations and reassurances that today's event would be educational and peaceful, which we strongly believe it will be, Representative Walorski has chosen not to join us in that deliberation today. However, we have some expert speakers from different parts of the healthcare trenches with us today who can enlighten us with the facts and help each of us to discern where we stand now on the future of healthcare. And even though she's not here, we pledge and we invite each of you to join our coalition and to be part of this effort to ensure that Congresswoman Walorski hears every view that's voiced, and to insist that she answers every question raised. It's been said that the first responsibility of every citizen is to question authority. If today's event seems unusual, which there have been comments, that it's unusual, perhaps that's because we've forgotten this crucial role that we play in making democracy work. Thank you all again for coming. Let us pledge to question, to peacefully deliberate, and to insist on responsive government. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to Taylor now.
Hello again. So my name's Taylor Populars. I'm a reporter with ABC 57 alongside my colleague Torian Small. We're very happy to be here today, and we thank you guys for this opportunity. And we're very impressed with the turnout, especially on what is probably the first nice spring weather weekend we've seen in a while. So I applaud you for that. So as Nicole mapped out in her intro, we're here for a very mature, informative, and in-depth discussion. We have this fantastic panel who will be doing most of the talking because they're the experts here, and we want to hear from you guys. So you either already have submitted questions via index cards that have been collected. If you need an index card and a pencil to write down a question you may have, whether it's for one of our panelists, whether it's for Congresswoman Walorski and her staff, although they're not here, or a general question about the topic, raise your hand throughout this town hall, and we have volunteers who have stickers on their chests who will come and give you that index card and collect it. What Torian will be doing throughout the town hall, alongside with his volunteers back here, is sifting through the questions. We already have a decent amount, and we want as many as possible, but unless you guys want to be here till midnight, we're going to try to select questions that we feel will provide the broadest information for you guys, cover the widest range of issues that our panelists will be able to discuss and that we'll be able to disseminate information for. So please keep your hands up if you have a question that you already written down, or if you need an index card, our volunteers will be there throughout that. We also are passing around a sign-in sheet that if it hasn't come your way yet, it will. Please sign in. We want to take stock of everybody who is here. So if you don't find that sign-in sheet at some point, raise your hand. A volunteer will come chat with you, and at the very end, we can at least get your information. But we want to reiterate that this is a peaceful and a mature town hall. I know you guys have probably seen reports throughout the last few months of very, intense town halls throughout the country, and while it's great to see that passion, we want to direct that passion to discussion, and we want to direct that passion to informative topics and informative conversation. And with the panelists we have here, we hope to do that. We hope you guys will respect that as they will respect you. And we're all here for a common purpose, and that's to have an important conversation that's on the minds of many people. And the best way to do that is to stay calm, cool, and collected, to write down your questions. We'll get through as many as possible. So I know there may be times you want to start chants or things. Try to hold that energy and write down a really great question or something. So it'll be good. And we're just happy to have you guys here. Again, a fantastic turnout. So the way this is going to work out is while the questions are being collected and sorted through, we're going to hear from our panelists to start off. And you saw in your programs, there are 3 main topics that we're going to touch on. And as we go through those, you will be introduced to your panelists. And I will ask each of them to introduce who they are, what their background is, kind of what brings them to this table, this side of the room, and you'll hear a bit from them. I also have my lovely timekeeper, Dan, down here. We are going to be keeping people to time limits, and this applies most to you all. When we start answering questions, the answers, we're going to limit each answer to 3 minutes tops. So we could get an in-depth answer, but we can move along. So we hope that you will respect that, as our panelists will try to respect that as well. So I guess we'll get started. And the first topic, as you can see in your programs, is what are the major provisions of the Affordable Care Act? Who is covered by the ACA, and what does the future look like for them? And we're going to turn it over to our first member of the panel, Joanne Burke with the Center for Aging Studies. And Joanne, you can start us off. You can sit, yeah, you can talk right into the microphone.
Hi, everybody. I am so moved by your presence here today. I had no idea how many, and I don't think any of us knew how many people would come today, but you've really given me a lot of optimism for the era we're living in right now. It's just, it's wonderful. I'm almost moved to tears here. I have been working in healthcare for 50 years. It's a long career in healthcare. I have an undergraduate degree in nursing. I've worked in nursing homes, I've worked in hospitals, I've worked in home health care, and then I have 2 graduate degrees in social work, and I've also worked in those settings as a social worker. I spent almost 18 years, I was at St. Mary's College, and I taught social work and gerontology there and developed the gerontology program, and then Brother Jesus asked me to come over and help them at Holy Cross College, so I'm over there helping them with a Lilly grant there for gerontology with their Center for Aging Studies. I decided I would just take a look backwards. What I want to talk about today is the part of this discussion regarding the Affordable Care Act and its repeal that's not getting a lot of attention. And that is block granting Medicaid back to the states, or it can be a per capita approach also, but either one, turning that federal program back to the states. And what does it mean for older adults? I know Mark's going to give a lot of information on what it will mean to children and their parents. I want to focus on older adults. Right now, we probably, I think, have a clash in our culture right now between our high cultural value on individualism in the United States and population aging. We live in an era where more of us are living longer than ever before, and basically, we don't know how to do it. Now, one of the problems with individualism, it implies that we'll be able to take care of ourselves. Well, some of us are living beyond the time when we can take care of ourselves, and due to some age-related diseases, etc., we need some help. Well, we've never really fully addressed that in this country, but we began to help ourselves with that with the initiation of Medicare and Medicaid in the mid-1960s. And right now, there's discussion when we turn Medicaid, if Medicaid is turned back to states, it means that Medicaid, as it has been as an entitlement program for older adults, will be changed, very much changed. It will turn the federal program into state programs. Well, so what? I told you I was going to look back. I'm going to look back to 1963, when I started nursing school at the University of Cincinnati, at Cincinnati General Hospital. That was the welfare hospital for the city of Cincinnati. I was raised on a farm down here in central Indiana. Going to Cincinnati in the inner city was a huge cultural change, let me tell you. I remember as a first-year nursing student walking into those clinics for people that were on public assistance in Cincinnati. I think my mouth dropped open. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And it wasn't just a scene in Cincinnati, it was a scene in South Bend and across the country before we had Medicare and Medicaid. There were older adults sitting on those wooden benches in those dark old clinic waiting rooms, waiting to be seen. They had rags wrapped around their legs because they had congestive heart failure and had edema in their legs, and their legs were seeping with fluid. There were people that were brought in from the boarding houses where people were taking care of them and taking their Social Security checks if they had one. And these people had contractures. That means they hadn't been exercising. They probably had been in bed. And people with contractures, you can't even move their limbs. They're stiff and fixed after a while. We had people with pressure ulcers, deep pressure ulcers, down to where you could see their bones on their hips, their bony prominences. It was awful. This was the United States of America in 1963. Now, we have some isolated cases of that now, but a lot of that has changed due to better health care and affordable health care, due to Medicare, which is socialized medicine, it's what it is, and Medicaid, which helps with long-term supports and services. Medicare pays for rehabilitation and pays for the treatment of acute care and primary care. Medicaid is the system that for 60% of people in nursing homes right now, Medicaid is paying for that. Now, if Medicaid is block granted back to states through changes that are now proposed with the legislation that's currently being discussed, Medicaid will become basically a state program, and there will be less federal. Right now it's a federal-state match, and there will be less federal funding available to the states. Now, I am a vice chair on the Indiana Commission on Aging. I asked the director of the Division on Aging 2 weeks ago what she thought would happen if Medicaid is block granted back to the states. They are looking in the state of Indiana at congregate housing. But that's not going to mean that nursing home care, as it has been done, may be done that way. We don't know what the future of nursing homes would be. We know more people want to stay at home than people usually don't want to go to a nursing home. There's some wonderful caregivers in nursing homes. A lot of the informal care for long-term supports and services are done by families. But sometimes it just gets to be too much, or people may not have family members to care for them. We need to be very careful with whatever legislation is passed, that we take into account that we are having 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 in this country every day. There's oceans of us. I'm right at the top of it. This is insanity. Instead of running away from the problem, you just really make me optimistic about what we might do with this issue. And that is roll up our sleeves, come together, and figure out how we are going to take care of all age groups in this country. And a lot of the people who are supporting the individuals who are proposing the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, and they don't really talk about Medicaid very much. The people that are supporting them are the people that are going to be most heavily impacted by this, and they don't know, they don't understand. So I'm hoping, everybody in this room knows someone who's getting older and may need some assistance. Please help people understand how important this is. I know we can do it. It's a matter of us getting better informed, coming together like this, and really seeing what we can do. Remember, I'm going to end the way I began. Population aging. More of us are living longer than ever before. We just don't know how to do it. And we're going to learn by coming together and working together to make this work. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Joanne. You started us off very well, and you're making my job easy because she stuck to her time limit. For these intros, we're limiting certain panelists to 10 minutes, certain to 5 minutes to help keep things moving along. Before we move on to our next person, I wanted to mention something I did not at the start. We also have a hashtag for those of you on Twitter, and the hashtag is capital IN02 Town Hall. Okay, that's capital I, capital N, number 0, number 2, Town Hall. I capitalize the T in town and the H in hall if you want. We'll find it either way. But for those of you who are here and you want to tweet things, questions, comments, observations here, please feel free to. If you have loved ones or family or friends who are not here and want to engage, we're also monitoring the hashtag to see if any other questions come in, and those will also be jotted down with all of our questions back there, which, again, those that don't get asked here at this setting will still be delivered to the Congresswoman's office and to her staff, so your voice will be heard in some way. And I just wanted to add from the news perspective real quick that we also, my colleague Torian and I did reach out to the Congresswoman's office, and as we do for many things, and we hear back from them usually, we reached out twice in the last 2 weeks for this town hall to see if she or a staff member would be coming, and we did not hear back at all, just so you're aware. So a lot of people have tried for this, but as you heard from Joanne and as you'll hear from our other panelists, we have a lot of expertise here, and this is still going to be a very valuable use of your Sunday afternoon. So I'm now going to switch it over to our panelist, Mark Fairchild, with Covering Kids and Families, and I just want to reiterate what his introduction is kind of about, covering what are the major provisions of the Affordable Care Act, who is covered by the ACA, and what does the future look like for them. There you go.
Is my presentation in the queue?
Oh, yeah. I believe it should be clicked for you.
All right, so we're basing this on should. All right, good start. Hey, all right.
There we go. Oh, you have control from there.
All right. Oh, I have control. Oh. All right. Well, again, I'd like to start out with just, wow, incredible turnout. I, for once, get to not feel alone because I thought I was the only person that spent my Sunday nights doing healthcare policy research. So this is excellent. So yeah, you can join me every night. I'm also the other viewer on C-SPAN. It's me and probably one over here. Okay. Yeah, I double the ratings when I start watching it. It's great. All right. Well, I'm Mark Fairchild. I'm with an agency called Covering Kids and Families of Indiana. We do two primary things. One, we do enrollment of folks into different programs in the state, such as our Medicaid expansion program, HIP 2.0, and other programs. I know we have another navigator with us here as well that can talk more on that role. And the other part is going out and really making sure that there's a strong advocacy presence in our state when we're talking about healthcare reform, policy changes, and everything else at the State House and nationwide. It's something I'm very pleased to do, and I'm also a social worker by training, so we're in good company. Technically, I'm a social worker, a lobbyist. I'm from Michigan, and I went to Ohio State, so I'm not always the most popular person in the room. So, as was noted, I have control, so too bad, right? Okay. Well, I'm going to go through a lot of the more jargonish things, so I apologize in advance for that, but it's really because we want to make sure everybody leaves here not just passionate, but educated about how we're going to approach these things. So you have a few points in your pocket that you can be thinking about and be prepared for, and of course, I'll be staying for the questions and everything else as well. So first thing I just want to make sure that we're acknowledging is that healthcare, sadly in America in a lot of ways, has become a very political discussion. And we know that. That's why we're here today. We know that in a capitalist society, there's business interests afoot. There's a lot of other investments involved, and it doesn't make it a simpler discussion for us. We also know that really a lot of the tenets that we're talking about in the Affordable Care Act are things that have been bantered about for years and years. As a matter of fact, I know we have some of the audience that remember Newt Gingrich and that Republican-controlled Congress. A lot of these ideas started from there. So be aware that part of the discussion is one of the parties wants to be the one responsible for fixing healthcare, and they know that that's going to bode well to them in the end. The fact that the current healthcare climate is based on a Democrat-controlled Congress and a Democrat president is something we need to take into account. As a matter of fact, if you want to be my best friends when you leave, which you all do, right? Okay, so to be my best friends, you just need to do one thing for the entire remainder of your life. You shouldn't have said yes before I said that, right? Because the clear example we have of how political healthcare has become is the word Obamacare, right? And it's one both sides really embraced, of branding the ACA as Obamacare for different motives for each one, but it put into a realm where it was really deemed somehow a political decision what you would do with your healthcare decisions. As a matter of fact, I've talked to many consumers and many I've worked to enroll, that part of their resistance to enrolling in healthcare coverage was the fact that it was Obamacare. And that's a sad reality, right? But it's one that we need to acknowledge. And the other part of being my best friend means whatever happens going forward, don't care what it's called, care what it does, right? And we all need to be a part of that. I'm not a big person about who gets credit for what. I'm big on making sure folks have the health care coverage that they need, that keeps them healthy, that keeps their families healthy, and gives them what they need to look forward to the future. Okay, so a brief primer on how insurance works. I'm bringing this up because there's been some interesting tidbits in the media, including John Ryan went up and said, do you realize the ACA means all these people that are healthy are subsidizing the cost of all these people that are unhealthy? That's called insurance. And all forms of insurance operate that way, right? We know that. That's car insurance, everything else that's involved. You're going to have high-risk users and low-risk users, and they subsidize each other and go through that. If you're extraordinarily high risk, there are some realms where those folks pay more or have more complex things. Luckily, the ACA really limited some of those. They made it so we're not dealing with these high-risk pools that cost twice as much based on age and pre-existing conditions. And we had those mandates that came into play to make sure that happened and work to diversify the pool. And we'll go into that in a little bit. But we also know that there's other things that are a factor. An important part of the ACA, my favorite part, is probably the preventative care services getting covered, which again, a lot of folks are not aware that that's a part of the ACA. One easy part of education you do is bring that up. I would love to believe that that's what the insurance companies brought in out of the goodness of their hearts. It was not. But it is the biggest factor in how we can offset healthcare costs, by having that preventative care in place. And we'll talk in a second about essential health benefits, and that's one of them. Okay, so I get to be the person that goes over all the holes that are being poked in the ACA right now. By the way, I'm also one of the first people to say the ACA is not perfect. It isn't, and we can acknowledge that. We know that we spent 40 years or so working on Medicare and Medicaid, and we're adapting those and fixing those and working with those every day. And there's a lot of things in the ACA that also need to continue to be worked on. We know the largest thing that's been brought up is the mandates, okay? The ACA, especially the individual mandate that everybody has to have health coverage, right? Also, there's business mandates for employers of more than 50 workers that you need to have insurance coverage for a certain portion of the workers that are full-time. And the most popular one that's been in the media lately has been the essential health benefits. Right? And I've got those up there. I'm not going to list all of them. We heard a lot about things like maternity care, mental health coverage, prescription drug coverage, very large ones. And these are ones that, while the current proposals haven't directly gone after those yet, it's in very, very wide discussion. That if we simply reduced all those things we're making everybody pay for, it would be a whole lot easier. But there's some problems with that, right? One, there's obvious things. We already discussed how insurance works. Everybody subsidizes everybody else by what they don't use. Maternity care was one of the big ones, saying, I'm a 65-year-old woman, I'm not going to be having any more kids, why am I paying for maternity care? Right? My answer back is, I don't know. Why are you paying for my prostate exams? Because that's how it works, right? And that's the reality of the situation. And a lot of people don't realize what's in here. When we talk about that, and this is one of the things that really brought back the alternative proposal, the American Health Care Act, back to reality. They looked at it and said, wait, prescription drugs are on there? Didn't we just start fixing that donut hole problem and start making that affordable? That's from here. Substance use treatment and mental health treatment, massive, especially in Indiana. With the opioid crisis that we're going through that's ravaging so many of our communities, I know we get a lot of attention down in southern Indiana. I know just as well how bad it is up here. It's statewide, it's nationwide. Why would we, just when we're getting a foothold, look at ever making that an optional component, right? But those are seen as the things that drive up the cost. The interesting thing is, let's go back to how insurance works. If your insurance policy only covers the things you're absolutely going to use, will that make your insurance more expensive or cheaper? Right, right. Remember, if you were a nice, responsible youngster like me and only got in about 3 accidents in your first year with having a car, you know full well that you're going to be paying a little bit more because you're using those benefits much more frequently than everybody else, right? So if we reduce it so it's only covering the things that absolutely everybody's using for themselves, that's not going to cost mitigate for us at all. So there's some lack of reality when you really dig deeper into that, of how far we want to go with those things. Next, and we already talked a little bit about Medicaid, but Medicaid expansion, which is where individuals between 100 and 138% of poverty were given the ability to take Medicaid coverage. Now in Indiana, it's a little bit different. We took the Healthy Indiana Plan and made it into the Healthy Indiana Plan 2.0. I was not in charge of naming. That was when it was cool to put 2.0 and stuff after things. So, and we maintained that. So those folks that were in that hole where they couldn't really afford good coverage were able to get coverage at something that's very similar to the coverage benefits in Medicaid. Then next up, the big criticism, probably one you're going to hear the most, is the state exchanges. Indiana doesn't have a state exchange, so that's a good thing to share if you're talking to stakeholders. And the federal exchanges. And we're going to just really briefly touch the exchanges because I'm running a long time, but nobody else probably wants to cover that one. But basically, it was a system set up where everybody that was uninsured could go in and purchase coverage and have it partially subsidized through the government. This has been the biggest area of criticism. because of a few things, and a few things that really don't make a lot of sense. One is the reality that rates went up in the exchanges. Rates go up in every insurance. But we were dealing with a group that hadn't necessarily been insured before and didn't have a clear realization that that 10% increase every year was actually fairly normal. We had our Young Invincible group not sign up in the hopes that they would, because this is the first year where the penalties for not joining are greater than the cost of insurance, which is a big part of the rush this year to get it done before they kind of feel that push to get involved. And then lastly, I do want to mention that it is about the insurance companies, and the insurance companies can't make a very wide profit margin off the exchanges. There's too many things where they've got to self-regulate themselves. They can't increase rates the same as others, and we just need to have a clear recognition of that. So I'm not going to go into block grants other than the fact that one thing I would love everybody to take home is block granting limits enrollment and it limits funding per people. When we have a public health crisis, that's not acceptable. And public health is unpredictable. And we had that in Scott County earlier this year. We had the AIDS outbreak. My team and many other teams from across the state flooded down there, used things like the flexible funding we had through the Affordable Care Act to address that, get people enrolled, get people protected, get them coverage, and take care of that situation. Under a block grant, we had said, hold on a minute, we need to find a way to raise those funds before we can help you, and that would not have been acceptable. I think we can all agree with that. So if you want a good take home, that is a take home. And we know we have 1,000 more Scott counties waiting to happen. So that's one, and especially in this community, especially for the Congresswoman, she needs to hear and she needs to be aware of that. So thank you, I'm out of time, but I will be around for the questions.
Thank you, Mark. I let Mark go over his time because he had a lot of valuable information, so I hope you guys appreciated that. What we're also doing throughout this town hall in between questions and answers from our panelists is you're going to hear from some citizens who have some testimonials that they said they wanted to share during this. So I'm going to call up my colleague Torian Small, who's going to introduce 2 of our citizen testimonials, and I'll let him take that away.
Thank you, Taylor. I'm going to have Cassie join me on stage now. Hello, Cassie. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself briefly and then give your testimonial.
Okay. My name's Cassie Walker. I'm a mother to a preemie, so I'm going to share the story about my situation with that. All right. So there are 1 million things that go through your mind when you're about to give birth prematurely. Cost is not one of those things in the forefront of your mind when you have insurance. With expansion Medicaid, I had insurance that covered my extensive medical costs while I was pregnant. I needed close monitoring every day because I had an illness called hyperemesis gravidarum. I couldn't I couldn't drink something as simple as water without violently vomiting for I couldn't drink something as simple as water without violently vomiting for hours, 60 to 80 times a day, every single day. I had one of the worst cases of hyperemesis in the state of Indiana at the time when I was pregnant. Hyperemesis can lead to maternal death and or death of the child or extreme prematurity, which was the case with my son, Bruce. He was born 15 weeks early and weighed 1 pound, 13 ounces. He had numerous challenges to overcome, but because of the ACA, I did not have to worry about rationing his care based on how much it cost. With hyperemesis, the type of treatment you receive is based on the severity of the illness. In my case, ideally, one would have at-home nursing care so you could be hooked up to IVs and stay hydrated and get nutrition, which I desperately needed. However, Medicaid hasn't caught up to hyperemesis treatment, which meant the only treatment I was allowed to receive was 5 Zofran tablets per month, even though my doctor had prescribed 5 per day. So I was put on a trial of a medication called Diclegis, which I had responded to well, but Diclegis is expensive and it was not on Medicaid's list of approved medications. Even though I continued working through my pregnancy despite being so ill, I did not make enough to be able to afford that treatment, so I went without. After one day of vomiting pretty violently, I had severe hip pain. When that happened, I had tore my placenta, which threw me into labor. By the time I got to the hospital, which was about an hour after it started, I was 10 centimeters dilated. There was nothing doctors could do to stop it. Bruce had suffered a multitude of premature-related complications. Among the most severe were grade 1 brain hemorrhage, respiratory distress syndrome, chronic lung disease. With that came apnea, which caused him to stop breathing multiple times, which resulted in prolonged bagging by doctors and nurses. He had a PDA and PFO, which are holes in the heart. When he was 4 weeks old, he became anemic and needed emergency blood transfusion. He later tested positive for MRSA and had to be put in isolation. He had 2 hospital transfers and spent a total of 6 months in the NICU. Despite these serious complications, he was determined to overcome it all. After his hospital stay, we started receiving bills due to a mix-up, which was covered by, since it was covered by Medicaid. What I saw was something no parent should have to worry about. His medical bills in total came to $1 million. This is something no middle-class family could ever afford. And without expansions to Medicaid, this would be something I would never be able to pay off. Medicaid is not without its faults. Had I been approved to receive the intensive care that comes with having hyperemesis, there's a good possibility I would have never torn my placenta and went into labor early. Early intervention and preventative care seems expensive to pay for up front, but when you look at the cost of what it costs to treat the aftermath of not treating the problem early, the solution's pretty obvious. Getting rid of expansions to Medicaid leaves families like ours in impossible situations. Before expansions to Medicaid, NICU families had to ration care based on the cost. Sometimes they would reach the conclusion that fighting is not an option and choose comfort care instead. When that conclusion is reached, the baby will die. Instead of repelling the ACA and the expansions that come with it, the solution is to have a system in place for families like ours that emphasizes preventative care and early intervention. In the long run, we can reduce the number of complicated pregnancies with quality care. We will save money and lives. We're all one illness away from becoming incapacitated. The ACA ensures that if that happens, you will not be left out in the cold with nothing. Despite the faults of the ACA, being without it would have made my situation much worse. I'm ready to work with lawmakers to fix those problems with the ACA and help save money and lives. We all deserve access to quality health care that's affordable for everybody. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Cassie, so much for sharing your story with us. Next, I'm going to bring up Meg. Hello. If you could just introduce yourself and then explain your story.
Hello, my name is Meg Ratty. I am 31 years old and I was diagnosed with HER2 breast cancer when I was 29. I am almost a year out of treatment and I do not have the gene for it, so I got it from exposure to something. And I did not have health insurance when I was diagnosed. I am a personal trainer and a single mom, and I do not make very much money. I'm in the low-income group. I was not sure what I was going to do with my finding out my diagnosis, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my hearing my diagnosis and how I was going to pay for it. I was fast-tracked to Medicaid. It took a team of people at St. Joe Hospital to help me get the coverage that I needed. And I couldn't start any of my chemo treatments. They don't fill any of the prescriptions until I was actually covered because of the cost of them. So even if my parents said that we would pay cash, whatever we needed to do, but the hospital would not fill them anyways. So I received 17 treatments. I had lost my hair and I had a bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction. And I also had to have a hysterectomy because my type of cancer is hormone driven. So I was really scared, and you know, that cost can bankrupt somebody. Absolutely can. And I'm really thankful for my coverage that I have received. It's been very helpful, but I'm concerned about having a pre-existing condition like my cancer diagnosis. I'm worried about how I will be able to afford health insurance later on. I also have a gene for an unknown variant of colon cancer. So my age, people usually don't get colonoscopies at this age, but I have to get one every 5 years. And my son also has to get tested for it as well, even though he's just about 6 years old. So because of that, I know that there's going to be a lot of costs down the road. So my question for Jackie, and why I'm here today, is to tell you guys my story and ask her what she can do for us. What can she do for people like that are in my situation, who have pre-existing conditions, and how are we going to afford health care and have a healthier, longer life that we absolutely do deserve to live. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. You're going to hear more remarkable testimonials throughout today. If you're touched or moved by what you hear tonight, I encourage you to use the hashtag IN02townhall and share these stories with everyone else. Taylor.
Thanks, Torian. Yeah, we've been monitoring Twitter, and a surprising number of people are tweeting about this and tweeting questions in. So if you see me or Torian on our phones, please know we're not being rude. We're giving our questions to our organizers back here. But thank you both ladies for sharing those personal stories. These testimonials are obviously very emotional, and we recognize how much courage it takes for people to get in front of a room like this and share their stories. So thank you. So we're going to continue hearing from some of our panelists now. We're going to be moving on to the next topic, which, as you can see up on the screen, what measures did the ACA take to ensure quality of care, and what do we need to do to ensure health care quality in the future? So a very important question. You'll note in your program that there are 2 panelists in this section, but Robin Vita could not make it today. So we're going to hear from Sister Suzanne Brennan from Trinity Health System. Suzanne, you have 5 minutes. Take it away. You have a PowerPoint as well? I believe we'll be getting it for you so that you could click through it. It's always technical difficulties. I didn't get slides. Oh, you did not get slides? Okay. Guess you did not get slides. So I guess try to verbalize what you have.
I will do my best.
Perfect.
Okay. I have started with a cartoon, so you just use your imagination on this, okay? There are 2, I should say something about my background. I'm also a social worker. And then I went into finance as I was a CEO in a few hospitals in the country, so I did that. And then I've been on the Trinity Health Board for about 12 years, and I just finished. So back to the cartoon. Okay, use your imagination on this, all right? There are a number of mountains with crevasses, and there are 2 little elephants in the middle of these mountains in the crevasse. And one elephant says to the other little elephant, "Nobody knew it was so hard to repeal and replace healthcare." And then down in the corner, there are 2 little animals, and they say, "Plan B is have everybody close their eyes." So I want to go off of that and say how wonderful these powerful testimonies are and how important they are that stress the need for dialogue and conversation, and let's not close our eyes. Essential elements of population health care, that's one very strong aspect that the ACA has brought into our attention is population health care. And that means that there's coverage and access as a moral and pragmatic imperative. And that this kind of health care, people-centered health care, begins with people being covered. People need coverage options that are affordable, meaning, for example, these exchanges that have been put into place, they really do help, and they really do help people to get coverage, and it's affordable. They need to be secure, that is, they need to be good, stabilized systems that people can depend upon. They need to be high functioning, so you don't have an error of receiving a bill for $1 billion. I wanted to add too that the ACA, in terms of quality, you want to be insured, but the reduced the on-insurance rate by 8.9% and has improved access and benefits for major coverage success sources for all those under 65 years of age. It's increased that. The exchange coverage, approximately 10 million people currently receive this coverage. Medicaid expansion, 15.7 million people have received this coverage because of that. And then employer insurance has also increased to protect benefits of employees. So our communities need us not only to deliver high quality medical care, but also to be leaders in reducing social determinants to health care. That means education. That means we need to look at food, nutrition. We need to look at the environment. And a program I wanted to mention that I think has been brought about because of ACA is called the PACE program. And this is for persons who are they're on Medicare. They are also on Medicaid. It's dual coverage. And this program I visited one in Massachusetts, and I went there, and it's a place where these folks can come every day. So there's respite care for their family. They can socialize. There's another story there where I was there, and a gentleman was brought in to the PACE program, which is just a nice place to be. And he was brought in by an ambulance. And what has happened is the gentleman becomes very, very anxious. And so he had been going to the emergency department before. And they kind of calm him down, and then he'd go home. Now he goes to the PACE program. They calm him down, and he goes home. And think of the money that has been reduced by being able to do things like that. Think of the family who receives respite care. They know that the person is being taken care of. They do physical therapy there. It's just a wonderful, wonderful program. And that was brought about by the ACA. Some other incentives that were recently put in place. The healthcare organization bears the cost of preventable readmissions. So if you're in the hospital and you are discharged and it's too soon of a discharge, you come back within X amount of days, the hospital is penalized for that. So that it's an incentive for the hospital to make sure that when you're discharged, you are appropriately discharged. You are appropriately, if you need further care, you're appropriately going to that other care so that you don't get readmitted to the hospital. So that was another benefit. Yes?
You could wrap it up if you have a
Thank
closing
you.
statement.
All right. Let me just see. I just want to say it's really great you're here today, and I'm going to wrap it up that way. And I want to thank the persons for those wonderful, powerful stories. Thank you.
Big thank you to Sister Suzanne Brennan. And obviously, there is a lot to talk about, so I appreciate our panelists sticking to our time, because like I said, while we're all here and are enjoying this, I'm sure we don't want to be here till midnight, so we'll keep trying to move it along. So next, we're going to hear again from another citizen who has a testimonial. So Torian, I'll bring you forward to introduce the next person.
Thank you, Taylor. If Elliot would join me. Test, test, test.
There we go.
What I'd like to do is basically address what might be considered a different issue. I mean, I don't have a personal testimonial regarding a major health crisis. But what I'd like to do is to share sort of observations made over the past of my career. I was basically a molecular biologist, geneticist who's worked in industry for a while and for the last 20 years in academia. And during that time of my career, sort of witnessed progress in biomedical research. And it's actually, at least in my opinion, it's been sort of an amazing story, Because what we've seen in the understandings in genetics, molecular biology, in my biased view, is like one of the great intellectual achievements of all time, okay? Basically, we got to understand what is the nature of heredity, okay? How that actually works. The fact that there's a chemical basis for this heredity, we got to understand how these chemicals basically transmit this information, basically understand how cells work to use this information and so on. And the observation that I want to share with you is the fact that the importance of federally supported research that made this all possible. Okay? So basically, and start screaming if this turns into a genetics lecture. It's not, I don't want it to do that, but I have a tendency, okay? Don't let academics talk, you know. Anyway, starting in about the 1950s, the notion we had of genetics and heredity was that there were certain quantities called genes we associated with structures in cells called chromosomes. We knew that there was something called DNA that seemed to be involved in the process of passing this information. But in the 1950s, with Watson and Crick, who's basically household names, I think, the structure of DNA was determined. And with that opened up a story of how a chemical could actually transmit genetic information. So it's not only the qualities that we pass from one generation to the next, but consider the situation if you have like a fertilized egg, one cell. That cell divides and basically keeps on dividing and forming a fetus that then turns into a whole individual. That somehow each of those cells carry that genetic information from that one cell and basically have all the instructions necessary for an organism, in this case a person, to form. Okay? And the amazing thing is that this is carried in a chemical, and through 20 years or so of NIH-supported research, we began to understand what the nature of this information is, how this information gets read and transmitted to the cell. Essentially, the story is that this molecule is a parts list. It lists all the different proteins that are necessary that are within a cell. The point being is that for 20 years, this intellectual edifice of how understanding what the nature of heredity was and how cells were able to read this genetic information had no practical benefit whatsoever. Even though it led to an understanding, it was impossible to figure out how this possibly could be used to improve medical care and health care. That changed in around the mid-1970s, where it became possible through the research that had developed to basically sequence genes, to basically be able to cut pieces of DNA and then paste them together and then transmit them into other cells, cells that could be grown into laboratories that could potentially be used as factories. At that point, it became possible for a biotechnology industry to start. And we saw at that point in the mid to late 70s the development of Genentech and Chiron and Amgen and a whole variety of other companies who were able to then begin to use this information and these techniques to basically start making products of biomedical and therapeutic value. The important thing is, the lesson is that without that 20 years of significant federal money, that biotechnology industry would never have developed, okay? Now, I don't want to try to sound like I'm an apologist for the prices that the biotechnology industry charges. You know, that's a totally different issue. The same products that they produce are much cheaper in other countries, and that has another issue in terms of single-payer possible type options. But one of the things that concerns me is that the budget projections or the budget suggestions of the Trump administration are calling for a approximately 20% cut in NIH budget, a $5.8 billion cut. That would be disastrous for the scientific research community in the United States. This is a preeminent community. I mean, American dominance in biotechnology is well established, and to lose that would be a disaster for the country. So I encourage you to think about that, and basically, in thinking about medical care and health care, also think about the types of responsibilities we have to support that types of basic research. Thank you.
Elliot gave us a lot of useful information. If you want to revisit what he or any of our speakers said, once again, follow along on Twitter using the hashtag IN02TownHall. Taylor.
Thanks, Torian. So moving on to the next topic, you're going to hear from a couple more of our panelists. You can see the question up on the screen. What did the Affordable Care Act do to make quality health care more affordable, and what additional measures are needed to control costs? So first up, we will bring Zanzer Anderson with Healthcare Navigator, and all the panelists in this section will have 5 minutes each to speak, so I just ask you to be mindful of that. Dan, our lovely timekeeper, is there. You can take the floor.
Okay, okay, there it is. Okay, and how do I click to the next one?
I believe you'll just press the arrow.
Okay. Hi, my name is Zanzer Anderson, and I was one of the very first federal and state navigators that was hired here in Indiana, and I also am a pre-existing condition. I have been diabetic for 40 years, and this was very important to me. Before that, I worked in the hospital for 14 years, and I would see people come in without health care. The reason why it says up there that is the ACA or Obamacare. Originally, it was the Patients Protection Act, Affordable Care Act, and they shortened it up. My thing was, when I signed people up, I didn't care what you called it. I had people come in and say, oh, I want that ACA, but I want that Obamacare. And I said, you know what? And I tell people, you can call it biscuits and gravy. I just want to get it for you. Okay, Mark has covered some of this, and it talked about how the Affordable Care Act was designed and expanded, and how they wanted the different subsidies and exchanges and things, and I hope you can read some of that. I'm not going to go all through it. You kind of covered it. You know, navigators, we navigate back to each other. The 10 essential guarantees, the one thing that I thought was very important were the medications, where they included drugs, the psychiatric care. There were 10 of them, and if they repeal or replace it, rather than, they want to cherry pick. All of these, the reason why we have them are very, very important. You wouldn't have, I'm sure they looked at 15 and said, hey, no, let's take it to 12, let's take it, and then the 10, and these 10 went out. And with the pediatric care at the bottom, you realize if we take care of our children when they're small and we do their vision and their hearing, we don't have to worry about the problems that they'll have when they get older. The other thing was the ACA, they had the other essential provisions was they prohibited people from dropping policy holders. You couldn't max out. Do you guys remember the time when somebody, before this happened, somebody would get cancer and the insurance would take care of it and so forth, and then after that, we'd have to have a chicken dinner to pay for the rest of their care. You know, selling chicken dinners is no way to take care of the sick. I used to always tell people, especially when they came in and signed up, I said, hey, now you get a free colonoscopy. Everybody gets one. They just loved it, couldn't wait. One of the testimonials I have, and this just happened, is our family we are diabetic. You look at us, we look at a piece of pie, ooh, your blood sugar goes up. But one of the things we never have to worry about was there's been no history about cancer. And my baby sister, who lives in Florida, had just had her mammogram done. She was fleeing clear, and she was checking on something. All of a sudden, she found a small pea lump. So she said, let me go back. And in the time she had the mammogram, in 3 months' time they took it out, she was at stage 2. If it had not been for the Affordable Care Act, we don't know as a family, well, we'd be selling chicken dinners, I'll tell you. The other thing was I would have to sit down with people and explain to them just exactly how the different tiers worked. yes, you got to pick your plan. We had people that said, basically, they were talking about, no, I would lose my doctor. I sat with people who had never had any insurance at all. I was with a woman, she was 59 years old and had never had a mammogram. She was like, well, I don't want to do this, I'd rather just pay the penalty. So we sat down and I went through it and showed her, and what was going to end up happening, and I had a lot of these, her policy was only going to cost her $12 a month. So she goes, wait a minute. So if I get it, they're going to pay me, and if I don't, I have to pay them? I said, yeah. And I said, you get a free colonoscopy and a mammogram. Woo. I think one of the things that happened with the insurance company, and I put that in there, people didn't realize before, with insurance, before the Affordable Health Care Act, companies only had to pay 60 cents out of every dollar for your care. After the Affordable Care Act, they raised that. They have to pay 80 to 85% of that. So of course they got mad. They didn't want this. But I do know here in Indiana, and maybe some to our governor, and maybe some parts to people around here, that there's no reason right now that you cannot get health care. Out there, for no matter what your situation or what your income, you can either get insured under HIP, HIP 2, the marketplace, or through your employer. And people who talk about my insurance with my employer went up, if you go back and look, the insurance with your employer went up every year. They changed the different parameters. The other thing I always like to tell people too, and I kept a list of people, is every year is, okay, you've never had insurance, but let me tell you something. I'm gonna come looking for you next year. I've got you signed up this year, because you have to go in and update your information. You stay with the same company, and the example is my husband and I, the first year we had Anthem. Oh, we loved Anthem, it was great. Next year we rolled around, they go, oh, we're gonna increase it by $100. And I'm like, oh, I ain't doing that. So we went ahead and we looked into it, and a new company came about the second year, and it was called CareSource. Well, CareSource reduced the cost, so we went with them. The next year, CareSource wanted to go up on us. So I said, yeah, and Ambetter was another company, because we have lots of nice exchanges here in Indiana with companies that you can get into. And Ambetter was going to reduce the cost. Not only my medication went down from $180 a month down to $25. The only problem was I love my doctor, and he was not in that particular network. So I told the doctor, I said, hey, I don't want to lose you, and I'm going to take this insurance because it'll cost me an extra $100. What will happen if I pay cash? He gave me a discount. I said, good, I'll come see you. So basically, I saved $100 a month to go see him every 3 months for came to about 25 or so. Ooh, I'm sorry, going over. Yeah,
you're good. If you want to wrap it up, please.
Yeah, but these are some of the essential things, and I still sign people up.
Thank you to Zanzer Anderson with Healthcare Navigator. We're now going to hear from two doctors who we're lucky enough to have here. We have Dr. Barbara Williams and Dr. Heckman Davis, both from, I don't know if do you both work together or separate practices? So you'll hear from each of them. I know there's two of you, and I'm sure you have a lot to say. If you could try to split the 5 minutes between the two of you. If you guys want to hear more, I'm more than happy to keep going. So. Because I also want to get to as many questions as possible, and we have a few more testimonials to hear from. I'll gauge the crowd, okay? But doctors, go right ahead.
Is this on? Yes, it is. Okay. I'm Dr. Barbara Williams, and I'm going to start out by saying that the ACA is a long document. Many of you have heard it's almost 1,000 pages long. And when I looked at the Republican plans, so far they seem to be very short, just a few pages. The other thing that I would like to point out is that the ACA is phased in over a long period of time, and even now, not all the parts are completely operative. However, some parts are already dismantled, and weekly we're hearing about the new administration and the legislators dismantling and repealing many of the parts of the ACA. The ACA is involving many more things than just providing health insurance for people under age 65. Daily, we hear from the administration and the legislators that the ACA is failing, exploding, imploding. It costs too much, and we ask ourselves why. There are financing issues in the ACA. The penalties are being not enforced anymore. And they are repealing the mandate if they can. And the administration and the legislators are therefore ensuring its failure, increasing the uncertainty. What does business and the economy dislike or not tolerate? Uncertainty. We hear that all the time from the economists. Why does the ACA cost so much? Well, I think you've heard one person state already that when someone gets insurance for the first time, and many people are getting insured for the first time, they utilize a lot. The pharmaceuticals have gone up tremendously in the last 10 to 15 years because there are so many new biological agents. These biological agents, particularly for things such as rheumatoid arthritis, are being heavily advertised. You can see them almost all the time on the news or on the TV. Just watch what things are being advertised on TV, and you know those drugs are several $1,000s per month. If you have good insurance, you can afford them. If you don't have insurance, you can't afford them. The efforts to reduce costs were negotiated out of the ACA. When I look at the plan, the ACA plan itself, all the research done to look at cost reduction are being prohibited from being done. Now, the issue of quality of care. We all know as physicians and healthcare administrators that quality is very difficult to measure. There were a few things put in place by the ACA, and I think Sister Brennan mentioned one of them. Hospitals are penalized for anyone who was readmitted to the hospital within 30 days of being in the hospital. That is to try and force the hospital discharge planning to be good and to make sure that someone who is discharged from the hospital has a good discharge plan and is well enough to stay out of the hospital for at least 30 days. But sometimes that doesn't really add up. Many of you who've been to a doctor in the recent few years notice that you're asked certain kind of odd questions like, have you fallen in the last year? Are your immunizations up to date, et cetera, et cetera? These are all quality measures that the ACA has put in place. It requires that hospitals are not being reimbursed for things such as hospital-acquired illnesses. There are many financing issues that have placed taxes on the wealthy. These taxes are on things such as unearned income for Medicare, and that has increased the Medicare trust fund. And lastly, there are a lot of excise taxes that were placed, and you've heard about the one on medical devices, which has been repealed, but the ones on tanning beds, the ones on pharmaceutical manufacturers and health insurers have not been yet repealed. The Republican administration have been interested in repealing all these. These finance the ACA.
And now, thank you, Dr. Williams. And as requested by the audience, Dr. Heckman Davis, you will also get 5 minutes. Just keep an eye on the clock, and you could hear from her now.
Thank you. I would add that Dr. Williams has a PhD as well as being an MD in internal medicine. I am a family doc. I've been in this area for 33 years in practice, and I've seen the whole gamut of healthcare. Until about 2 years ago, I delivered babies. I take care of the children. I take care of the students. We just did some student physicals for their sports this past week at a school. I take care of employees who have benefited from the ACA through their employer insurance. I see veterans, and I work with the VA. The veterans get some of their care through me, and some through the VA. I see some of the self-insured, some of my farmers. I'm in a rural area, and some of my farmers are self-insured, so I've seen those folks too. I see Medicaid folks, and I see Medicare folks. I have patients at a nursing home that I see, over 30 patients at one nursing home that I see. And I agree that if block grants are given, those people are going to suffer, because the average Social Security check is much, much less than the cost of nursing home care or even home health care. I would like to put in a plug for the South Bend Tribune on the front page today. There was an article about our health department currently being underfunded. Their sexually transmitted disease clinic already got budgeted out, and fortunately, IU South Bend Health Services picked that up. They last year immunized over 10,000 children last year, and that funding is now in danger of being cut too. So I'd like to put in a plug for everybody to read that South Bend Tribune article. I'll make my 5 minutes brief. In short, my patients that have been insured on the Healthy Indiana Plan 2.0 have generally been very satisfied with it. I would add that over 33 years, I've had patients that have been kind of in and out of the practice. You know, there would be times maybe they lost their insurance and I just wouldn't see them for years. And then they would come back and I would say, oh, here's what we need to catch up on. And I'm doing a lot of preventive medicine. So I'm here as a person that has seen a lot of different types of insurances. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ackman Davis. So great hearing from two doctors. We're now going to move back to citizen testimonials. Torian has a few more people he wants to introduce, and I believe one that he will be reading himself that's not his, but was submitted by somebody who's not here. So take the floor, Torian.
Thank you, Taylor. If I can have Amy join me on this stage. Hello there, Amy. Come over here. Introduce yourself. I'm going to hold the mic this time. Introduce yourself and then go into it.
That makes me feel not in control. I got to be in control.
All you then. All you.
All right. I am Amy. I am many things. I am one of those tattooed, pierced women that marches. But I am also, that's right. But what some people don't know about me is that I'm educated. I have a master's degree in healthcare policy and procedure, government policy and procedure, and nonprofit policy and procedure. That all equates to me to making about $45,000 a year, because I work in a federally funded nonprofit's preschool that shall not be mentioned. And I can't tell you how much the ACA helps my kids. We work with covering kids and families a lot. But I'm not here to talk about them. I could talk about them. I want to talk about my family and myself and my daughter, that's her, that's Erin. She's 26 years old. She got Medicaid till she was 19 because I was too proud and I wanted to do it myself. I made myself co-pay and deductible poor, while my husband didn't pay child support. But we did it. And all during that time, I went to undergrad school and I went to grad school. She is the biggest Notre Dame fan on the planet. Not to mention Cubs fan. What Erin stands to lose under this plan is incredible, because not only is it a problem for Erin, it's a problem for her moms. My wife, who is videotaping me right now. I have blown out both my shoulders, more than likely. Could be fibro, could be from lifting her all those years because I've never been able to afford a wheelchair lift. My wife's back is ruined from years of being a CNA and also lifting air, and she has to do all of her care now. My arm lifts about this high, and it may not get any better. I had surgery last October. My surgeon is well aware that I have ACA insurance. I may need other surgeries. He's promised to do them as quickly as he can before I lose my benefits. My question to you, Jackie Walorski, even though I've asked you thousands of times. Number one, my first statement is, if I were called to my boss's office and I didn't show up, I would be in trouble. Second of all, whoever answers your phone needs to be educated a little bit, because they tried to argue with me about the benefits of the ACA and they were woefully uneducated. Don't let these tattoos fool you. My daughter gets 32 hours a year for care. That's 12 hours a week. She can't take care of herself. We live in an inaccessible house, one toilet, one bathroom. I'm shaking like a leaf, I'm sorry. My wife has to lift her into the shower. My wife is her caretaker because of a block grant, I believe. My wife is able to get paid 12 hours a week at what, $11 an hour? 10 an hour to take care of her. Do you think she stops at 12 hours a week? What would happen if she stopped at 12 hours a week? My daughter would be in a facility with wounds that Medicaid would not pay to treat. They would just continue to get worse, because we've done that before. We've been into a nursing home and we had to go every day and do her wound care because their staff is woefully underpaid, woefully understaffed, and there's just not enough time. So what I want to know, Jackie, is when I succumb to the chronic tears in my shoulders, the fibromyalgia, and whatever else I am being tested for now because of the ACA, who is going to take care of my daughter? Who is going to make sure that she doesn't get a stage 5 decubitus ulcer and die at the age of 30? That's what I want to know. That's the answer I want. Thank you.
Thank you again, Amy, for sharing that moving story. I have another really touching story that I want to share. It's from Deb Ray, who is here today. Unfortunately, her chronic illness is making it hard for her to speak today, so I'll be reading her testimony. She says, I retired at the age of 62 after working since the age of 15. It was becoming increasingly difficult to do my job every day because I have 2 chronic illnesses. Both my parents and my younger sister died prematurely from most likely the same genetic disorder I have. The ACA has given me the opportunity to have a better quality of life before I became completely disabled. As an early retiree, the ACA allowed me to purchase my insurance through the marketplace. I have a good health care plan which helps me afford respiratory therapy and gives me access to excellent doctors and helps me pay for my medications, plus all of the preventative everyday care I need. The ACA saved my quality of life. As to the expense, in 2016 and 2017, I was actually able to save money on my premiums by shopping on the exchange. The coverage was just as good and, for some benefits, even better. I was able to cut my premium by about $50 per month by being patient and doing my homework. This extra $50 then allowed me to purchase a dental care plan. Thank you for that. Finally, I want to bring up Jenica. She's here. Okay. I'll give you the mic.
Thank you. I'm Jenica Libertor. I am a member of NICIC, and I wanted to share my story. This is the reason why I joined this coalition. In January 2014, my husband's employer-based insurance eliminated its annual and lifetime limits, which I believe were only $250,000 and $500,000 respectively, in order to comply with the Affordable Care Act, or the ACA, otherwise known as Obamacare. In February of 2014, we discovered that I was pregnant with triplets. Our children were born in July of 2014 at just 28 weeks gestation, 3 months prematurely, at 2 pounds 1 ounce, 2 pounds 1 ounce, and 1 pound 8.5 ounces. And all three required a nearly 3-month NICU stay. Their collective hospital bills exceeded $5 million. This figure does not include the follow-up visits with specialists or the early intervention therapists who came to our house to get them back on track developmentally with their peers, nor the extra vaccines they required to keep their weak, premature immune systems protected. If you have not had an experience in the NICU, which I pray you never do, you might not know how crucial seconds can be in decision-making. While we were in the NICU, we observed many families whose children were born later with fewer medical problems than ours, who were not lucky enough to have decent insurance. Where we signed blanket waivers in the beginning of our stay, allowing the doctors and nurses to provide a variety of services the very second it was deemed necessary, other families with worse insurance or no insurance had to have each procedure explained to them and make impossible choices about whether their child's health was worth the cost. Best case scenario, this wasted several precious minutes in an environment where even such a short window of time meant life or death, or at the very least, long-term medical problems. Worst case scenario, parents could not afford treatments. We saw children, infants, die while we were at our most scared and vulnerable. I can't imagine the pain these parents went through and the guilt they still endure. I still often think of these families when I look at my own healthy 2.5-year-olds and thank God for the ACA. I know in my heart that they would not be as well off without the removal of the insurance caps just 1 month before their existence. I know that they might not have survived without it. To be clear, I would like to reiterate that my family is not on, nor have we ever received, our insurance through the Marketplace Exchange. This is only one small part of what the Affordable Care Act does to provide benefits and adequate coverage to all Americans. We benefited from one of the many provisions that the ACA provides to everyone who has any type of insurance. If you have employer-based insurance, the ACA benefits you. And so, I would like to have asked Representative Walorski, how? How, after hearing these experts and these testimonials, all based in fact, all people's real lives, how can you justify your decisions to vote for the American Health Care Act proposed by Trump and Ryan? And further, how could you have vocally backed the proposed alterations to that plan that would eliminate the Title I benefits, including maternity care? How can you hear my story and stories like this and justify that your approval of repealing the Affordable Care Act rather than fixing it is in alignment with your supposed pro-life party platform?
Well-deserved applause there. We're going to change gears a little bit. We're going to shift tones now to collected questions from you guys. We're still collecting them, so if you have them, be sure to raise your cards up and hand it over to Taylor while I go and pick them up.
Yeah, so just a couple points while we collect these questions and start getting answers to them. First off, thank you again to everybody who provided those testimonials. Obviously, from their emotion, from some of the pictures that we saw, it again took a lot of courage for them to get up here and kind of personalize this whole discussion. 2 points while they're collecting questions. One of the questions that we got, I wanted to ask right now because it requires kind of an in-person poll. So this is going to be a question where you need to raise your hand, okay? This was what somebody wrote in. They said, in order to respond to a common suggestion by some congressional representatives who have not held town halls, how many of you who are here right now are paid by the Democratic Party or, so how many of you here right now are paid by the Democratic Party or by some political action group to be here this afternoon? Anyone? So there's that, whoever wrote that question in, there's your answer to that. And then, because as a journalist, I believe in telling both sides of this story, I wanted to add an encounter I had with somebody a few weeks ago. I traveled throughout most of Michiana for a few days talking with voters. I think it was about the 50-day mark of President Trump's presidency to try to get a feel for how people were feeling about him and his administration. And what I did was I went to 3 different areas. I looked up all the voting results for all of Michiana, the 9 counties that our station covers. And I looked for the most pro-Trump area, the most pro-Clinton area, and then the area divided down the middle. The most pro-Clinton area was up in Benton Harbor, Michigan. The area divided down the middle was right here in St. Joe County. The entire county, which I'm sure some of you are aware, was so divided that Hillary Clinton only won, I think it was over 110,000 votes were cast. She won the county by 218, I believe it was. So show the divide. And then I went down to southern Elkhart County, this little township there that was super pro-Trump. And I spent the whole day knocking on doors there, just trying to get, an idea of why people supported him, how they felt about him so far. And I met this one guy. I won't say his name because he doesn't know I'm telling the story, but he talked to me off camera about why he supported Donald Trump, and we had a long discussion about the Affordable Care Act. And his story was interesting. He's an independent contractor his business, he works with cell companies to build and install cell towers out, so we could all use our phones. And he initially supported Ted Cruz, then he moved over to Trump when he became the nominee. He said that pre-Obamacare, as a small business owner, he was paying about $200 a month for his health care for him and his family. He had a couple children, him and his wife. He said after Obamacare, his premiums, he went up to $700 a month, $500 increase. And the interesting thing that he wanted to note was that that increase happened after his kids had moved out of the house and had gone through college and were living on their own. So it was just he and his wife. They they had no injuries, no illnesses, no claims that they had made in this time, but it went up $500 a month for them. And when I heard that, I was like, there are stories on both sides. So I just wanted to share that because that is a glimpse into some of the people who you may know, or some of you who may be here, who are frustrated with the Affordable Care Act because, as you mentioned, it's not perfect. And I think a lot of people agree with that, and there are ways to either improve it, repeal, replace it, whichever side you stand on. But I just wanted to share that story from a Donald Trump supporter who is very, very against Obamacare because of the expense it has cost him and his family. So now we're going to shift over to the question segment. We got a lot of questions. I think 50, 60, maybe 70 written in. We also got a few in on Twitter that we also put down on the index cards. Our team back here has been, as I said, shuffling through them to determine which ones will be best to put up here, have our panelists answer them. Torian is going to read off each of the questions, and then I will extend the invitation to any of the panelists to see who wants to answer it, if it is in their area of expertise. We also recognize that some of these questions may be directed to Congresswoman Walorski, so none of us can answer them. So they will also be voiced, some of them may be, but then again, all of these questions are going to be delivered to her and her staff. So please just know that. And I appreciated the passion you all had when I asked both of the doctors to split 5 minutes. So right now, we're at 4:47. I know that this was scheduled till 5. I'm not sure if any of our panelists need to leave. I'm more than happy to stay here as long as you guys want. And the longer you want to go, we can. But I totally understand if people need to start leaving or if they kind of want to call it quits at some point. But we want to get to as many questions as possible. So I'll switch this over to Torian. What's the first question?
Absolutely. So we got a lot of questions, and we separated them into quite a few different themes. I'm going to start with the theme of single payer. The first question, and I saw this a lot, why is healthcare not considered a right?
Who feels comfortable answering that, if anyone? Anybody? Yeah? Feel free. And again, we are trying to limit answers to these questions to 3 minutes. So if your answer is not 3 minutes long and another panelist wants to chime in, we'll have them. But I'm going to keep it to that 3-minute mark just so we could get to as many as possible.
Right. Absolutely. And this is one there's not an easy answer for, but it's the fact that we are a capitalist society. That healthcare, especially in America, even though it came here earlier than in other parts of the world, we built it around that capitalism. It's a commodity to be bought and sold and utilized as such. Do I agree with that? No, I don't think anybody in this room probably does. But we've got a lot of undoing to do with the ability to call it something else. And the fact that we are also a society that resists against things that are mandated, that we all have to play into. And that's something that's slowly changing, that we're getting closer to. We can look at that with Medicare as certainly a socialized medicine model, and we've seen success there. But there's a philosophical part of us that's hard to let go of. And we need to all be a part of that discussion to understand that as something different and understand it as a right.
And just to add to that, I'm going to stand up because
You could come to this mic if you want.
I didn't see this side of the room when I talked before, so I wanted to see them. But anyway, yes, is healthcare a right or a privilege? And I'm going to go back and refer to what I said in my presentation, and that is we have such a high value on individualism. We take care of ourselves. But we all know that as human beings, the way we have thrived is by community and helping one another. So it's something we really need to think about as we proceed with how we go about what we're going to do with healthcare in this country. We are the only advanced country in the world where the government is not controlling healthcare costs, and that's back to free market capitalism again. But do we negotiate the cost of care for a heart attack if we go into an ER? Of course not. So is healthcare a commodity? Big question for us. So I think it's wonderful that we have this opportunity with all of this happening to really, this is going to come back to us and say, is it a right or a privilege? And this may be the decision point, the decision time.
Dr. Williams wants to add something. Quick response.
I think the one place that it is a right is in the emergency room. And I think that we all need to remember that if we take the ACA away and we take preventive care services away, that is where we are all paying for the right to health care. The emergency room costs are extremely expensive. That is the last place that we want to be paying for our health care.
Thank you.
You guys touched on a lot of the follow-up questions I had, so I'm going to move on to another theme now. It's essential benefits. This question states, the AHCA would have dropped essential benefits. What would have been the consequences of dropping those benefits?
So referring to the American Health Care Act, which we know failed in the House, but was a big talking point. Any of our panelists?
Well, the essential benefits, you would not have emergency care. They would have carved out the drugs that are included. So therefore, you would have to either pay cash for your drugs or find another plan and do drugs like seniors do because they have Part A, B, and then they do D. And the things for children, like I say, if we take care of our children now, we don't have to worry about them in the future. Psychiatric care, which is very, very important for our veterans, young people. We have people, suffering from, they want to put the guns in the hands of people with mental issues. Well, if nobody has any mental issues, we don't have to worry about that. Let me see some of the ambulance care. If somebody gets hurt, do you want to have to throw them in your car and take them and get them to the emergency room? The 10, like I said, they came down to 10, and possibly there were more, but these were the 10 that the Congress decided were the most important.
And just one comment too. Our health system, it treats disease. It knows how to do that, but it does not know necessarily how to treat wellness and prevention. And that would be a large dimension that would be gone.
Did you want to add something?
As you know, Ryan Care failed to get enough votes, but the insurance plans the Ryan Care is being amended. Some of the amendments that I've been reading about include $15 billion for a federal sharing program to cover people that are high risk for 3 years, and then the states would have to take that over, coincidentally, when the next presidential election is. The Conservative House Freedom Caucus has called for an amendment to allow states to opt out of the requirement to insure for pre-existing conditions. And governors would be allowed to waive certain insurance requirements and certain health benefits like maternity care.
And Mark, you wanted to add something?
So just briefly, one piggybacking on our last speaker, there's actually already a waiver program in place that would allow changing a lot of the requirements on private insurance and the exchanges. It's just going to take a few administrative tweaks for that to happen. So there's a very real risk there. That's absolutely true. And there's a lot of simpler mechanisms to do it with than we would think. But to the original question too, what would it result in if we got rid of the essential health benefits? There would be more and cheaper plans on the exchange, which could be called a victory. Those plans would have very, very minimal coverages. They'd remind me of the cheapo plans I got in college because it was, at least I could say I had an insurance card. And people wouldn't know what they didn't have until they ended up at the emergency room.
Thank you for that. We've been told that there is a speaker that you guys are not going to want to miss. So what we're going to do right now is have one more question that we present to the panel, try to get it to be an overarching question. We'll hear from that speaker, and then we will figure out if we want to continue with questions or end it there. We'll take that step, so Torian.
Got it. Again, all these questions will be collected and sent to Representative Jackie Walorski. This one is criticism of the new Republican plan, and I guess this would be addressed to the entire panel. The federal Hyde Amendment already prohibits taxpayer funding for abortion care. Defunding Planned Parenthood would only ensure that low-income Hoosiers who use Medicaid at Planned Parenthood have fewer and sometimes no options for reproductive health care. Can you help us understand this thought process? Good luck.
Anyone?
No.
Shortest answer to date so far. Would anybody else like to build on that? Are we good for that?
Got it. Maybe Jackie could answer that. Joking.
So what we're going to do right now is put a pause on the questions. We're going to introduce our final speaker, and then we will determine what to do after that. Because we want to, if everybody still wants to stay, I'm sure we could arrange something. If not, we could end it at that. But we'll introduce the final speaker. I'm not sure where that. Oh yeah, come on up.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deborah Javelin, and I'm one of the many concerned District 2 citizens who helped organize this town hall event. I want to be sure to thank Nicole McLaughlin for her wonderful leadership. Without Nicole, this would not have happened. I also want to thank the many other amazing people who now form the Northern Indiana Community Coalition for Healthcare, as well as our co-sponsors, Community Wellness Partners. You all worked so hard to pull off this event. I'm proud to know you. And finally, thanks to all of you in the audience for giving up your afternoon to have this important discussion. So a bit about myself. I am healthy. My husband is healthy. I have 3 kids who've patiently learned a lot today, and they are all healthy. And I have health insurance through my employer. So why am I here? Why did I and so many other ordinary citizens with no prior experience in politics just spend the last 2 months of our lives organizing an event about healthcare? So there are 3 reasons. One is just the common decency to care about our neighbors. We hear all these moving testimonials, and we care about our neighbors. We want to do something. The second reason we got involved is more self-serving. I'm healthy, but it would be just as accurate to say I am not yet sick. None of us can say what's coming down the road. This may come as a surprise to some of our lawmakers in Washington, but we're all gonna die. Right? So I don't have health problems today, but I probably will have them tomorrow. Strengthening our nation's healthcare system is a task for all of us. But there's a third reason for organizing the town hall that I want to talk most about, and that reason can be summed up in a single word: representation. Congresswoman Walorski was invited here today, not just once, not twice or 3 times, but dozens and dozens of times. She was invited formally with invitations hand-delivered to her office. She was invited with our phone calls to her office, with faxes, with comments on her own Facebook page. She was invited to her face, and she was invited through her staff. She was invited by people holding signs in front of her district office or places where she was scheduled to meet. She was invited civilly, politely, respectfully. And the message over and over again was, Congresswoman, please listen to us. Please, before you take a firm position, before you claim to understand how the law affects us, before you take something away from us, your constituents, please listen to our stories. Now, most everyone seems to agree that there are problems with the Affordable Care Act. If the Congresswoman was predisposed to listen, she would know what we want to do about the problems. She would hear a clear opinion, maybe not unanimous, but certainly a majority opinion. Take the Affordable Care Act, fix what is broken, and please keep what is working. Admit that parts of the ACA are working well. Listen to our thousands of stories about how the ACA saved your constituents. Be open-minded. Gather information first from the people you're supposed to represent, not from the signals being sent by your party leadership. Use your constituent feedback to form your opinion. So we sincerely sought a dialogue. What we got instead was a huge snubbing. So to this very moment, Congresswoman Walorski has never answered our invitations, violating the convention of common courtesy that's used even for kiddie birthday parties, the good old RSVP, right? So she could not even look us in the eye and say, I'm not attending your event, and here's why. Instead, she ignored every testimonial, every plea for dialogue, and simply stated and restated her prior decision to repeal the ACA as if we did not exist, as if our thoughtful contributions held no value to her, as if no one told her that engaging with constituents is part of her job description. What's especially appalling is that Congresswoman Walorski voted for the awful repeal bill. So Walorski, as we know, serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, and that committee decided to vote on the bill before even receiving the analysis of the Congressional Budget Office, before receiving the numbers on how many people would lose insurance and how many people would face higher premiums. Walorski was so bound and determined to serve her masters in D.C. that she didn't want to hear any information that might alter her worldview in any way. Better just to block it all out and railroad the legislation through committee, constituents be damned and accountants be damned. So we had a piece of legislation that everyone ran from. The Democrats hated it, moderate Republicans hated it, extreme conservatives hated it. And the only people who liked it were the politicians like Jackie Walorski, who mindlessly did what their superiors commanded. So if 24 million Americans lose their health insurance coverage, including 61,000 people in her own home district, she's fine with that. If premiums go up for most people, but her 1%er friends get tax breaks, she's fine with that. If essential benefits like maternity care are eliminated, fine with her, so long as she's in the good graces of Trump and Ryan. If they have a spat, where will she go? Who's gonna get her in the divorce? So, this kind of lack of representation affects us all in District 2. Regardless of political leanings, we need a partnership in District 2. We may have different, sometimes opposing concerns and solutions, but we can still be committed to working together like neighbors. With no leadership in our district, we are now the adults in the room. Jackie Walorski practically doesn't live here anymore. She represents Washington, and she comes home to Indiana District 2 for her photo ops, her fundraisers, and her closed-door meetings, where, by the way, her staff sit with stopwatches and care more about getting tiny groups of people in the door and out the door in their allotted 30 minutes, so she can say to the news reporter, "Look, I have an open-door policy. Look at the people I just met." So I was at one of those meetings recently, and I witnessed the political theater of no-show Walorski. And after the meeting, she told reporters how productive they were, when each and every citizen in those meetings said the opposite, that the meetings were useless and frustrating, that we still want her to hold a town hall. Walorski told reporters that she prefers to meet in the closed-door small groups. Well, Congresswoman, we prefer differently, and we don't work for you, you work for us. So our preferences to meet publicly should be met. And since our preferences are not met, we aren't going anywhere. We demand accountability, and we will keep at it. We don't know what the Congresswoman will do next, but we have no illusions that she will seek our input or respond to our concerns. Maybe she'll try to continue to take away our health care protections. Maybe she'll try to dismantle Social Security or our public schools. Whatever it will be, we are prepared. We are upset, and we're not going anywhere. Her job is to represent us, and if she won't listen, maybe we need to yell louder, because we demand representation. So thank you again to the Northern Indiana Community Coalition for Healthcare and Community Wellness Partners for organizing this town hall event. Thank you all for coming. If you are interested in joining us, please send us an email, talk to any one of us wearing black and one of these stickers. Please continue to send your thoughts to Congresswoman Walorski, and just keep on keeping on. Thank you.
A big thank you to Deborah. As we close, first off, we have decided that this will be the conclusion of our event. If you have questions, I'm sure some of our panelists, if they're able to stick around, would love for you to come down and maybe ask them individually. And again, those questions will be delivered to the Congresswoman. I also wanted to add, I spoke to the Congresswoman in March when she was meeting with some of her constituents. And I asked her in her media availability, I said, is there a specific reason you won't attend this town hall or another town hall that may be set up? Is there a specific reason holding you back? And this was the second time I asked her the question in this interview. And I just want to, because she's not here, I want to report to you what she told me, in case you didn't see my story. Her response was, no, there really isn't. other than the open dialogue that we've had, meaning that day, has been very productive. And I think that we're going to continue with an open door. We'll continue having lots of different meetings and lots of different folks in here, but I think it's really important to have the time to drill down with folks and honestly hear them, and with no pressure on them either. A lot of issues come up when you have a chance to have real dialogue. So that's her response. On behalf of everybody here and my colleague Torian, I want to thank you guys for coming today, for being engaged and for cooperating and being very respectful. We appreciate the turnout, and feel free to come chat with the panelists. Thank you.